The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Well, we were off for the long weekend for the federal holiday, Christmas, for separation of church and state, but one religion gets a federal holiday. Not the topic of today's discussion, but we were off for that. And the American economy and really the country precipitating this free fall that we are seeing under President Donald Trump. I don't even know where to start, so we'll just start with the stock market. This is, of course, just one thing that is going on. The stock market totally crashing again the day before Christmas. Dow down 12.2% year to date as of Monday's closing. A very erratic up and down day today. Who knows where we will end up? But as of Monday's closing, the Dow down 12.2% since the first trading day of 2018, which was January 2nd. I got into a bit of a back and forth with Dilbert creator Scott Adams on Twitter, where he was saying, well, what has Trump actually done to precipitate the economic troubles that we are experiencing? And isn't it all just the Fed that we can blame? Of course, he's a Bernie Sanders supporter, very, very liberal guy. To which I responded, I would love to have you on the program to talk about this. And it looks like he is going to be back on soon. So we'll be talking to him and I will lay out the full case as to why what Donald Trump is doing is very bad for the economy. We have Donald Trump's cabinet increasingly empty. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. Total disarray. Anyone with a good head on their shoulders wants nothing to do with the guy. I think most sensible people understand that. More than a dozen investigations are going on looking at criminality in Donald Trump's business life, criminality in Donald Trump's political life, in Donald Trump's charity life, even amongst family members. Donald Trump Jr. reportedly expecting an indictment at any time. We already have, even aside from the dozen plus investigations into the president, people in prison or going to prison for crimes committed in the course of helping Donald Trump win. We are seeing Donald Trump ceding control of our military to adversarial foreign powers to the point that experts and allies are now wondering, was Trump blackmailed into some of these decisions? I'm speaking about Syria, and we'll talk about that later on in the program. The government is shut down. The government is shut down over a temper tantrum. Trump furious with Democrats, despite the fact that Republicans control every aspect of the administration of the federal government at this point in time. Trump shutting down the government over a temper tantrum and sending out erratic and ludicrous tweets throughout Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, which we will also get to. Plans for the U.S.-Mexico border wall potentially completely dead, although Donald Trump is claiming to have found $5 billion for a couple hundred miles of that 2,000-plus mile border. How much is this entire thing going to cost? And why are we paying for it if it's happening? If Trump said that Mexico was going to pay for it, that another disaster of the Trump presidency. And then, and I've been talking about this one, Pat, for a while, our allies are bailing out one after the other after the other. The United States totally out of the world climate change conversation. World leaders regularly laughing in the face of our president at the United Nations when the guy can't figure out how to sign a trade agreement with the Mexican and Canadian leaders. Just an absolute laughingstock. And then, of course, even previously claimed victories like the denuclearization of North Korea. It's not happening. North Korea definitely not denuclearizing and may actually be advancing nuclear research and nuclear development. Who even remembers that at this point, despite Donald Trump's tweets claiming victory? So we've got economic policy that's a joke and actively destructive, Pat, a deficit that's been blown up to record numbers, despite Donald Trump saying that he's going to fix that, a trade deficit that has actually increased, despite Donald Trump claiming that his tariffs were going to fix that. This is an administration in free fall, the likes of which we never saw under President Obama. We never saw under George W. Bush, despite him being a disastrous president. This is something we have not seen for a very long time.
Well, on the bright side, it's the holiday season. That tends to be a cheery time for many. Something about Hispanic unemployment and black unemployment. I can't remember what the numbers are. And also, no one in Trump's immediate family has yet been indicted. So that's another positive.
Yes, looking for the silver linings in this lovely time between Christmas and the New Year, although it looks like we're getting closer and closer to more indictments from Robert Mueller. So if you can point to something positive going on here, I know that there will be Trumpists who say, well, unemployment is down. And I would say, yes, I thought those numbers were fake when President Obama was president of the United States. But we do have those numbers. So that's something. What will be going on in 6 months? If you think the last 3 weeks have been bad, just imagine the next 6 months that we have ahead of us. Okay, so let's now start getting into a lot of these different issues that I listed in the last segment, currently plaguing the United States of America. There is a massive spiraling of the Trump administration that took place during our brief holiday break. It's hard to even really know where to start. But one place I want to start is the resignation and subsequent, you can't quit because I'm firing you, from Donald Trump, of Jim Mattis, the Secretary of Defense. Jim Mattis, one of the last remaining occasional voices of reason in the Trump administration. Rex Tillerson was one. He had the sense to leave. Doesn't mean I agree with the politics of Rex Tillerson. He just recognized the illegality of some of the things Trump wanted him to do. He recognized the lack of sense of the Trump administration agenda. Not a guy I agree with politically. Tillerson was somewhat of a voice of reason, an adult in the room. Mattis, the other one. Mattis announced that he was going to be resigning. Now, the timing of this is very interesting because you may remember that not too long ago, we heard from the Defense Department and the Pentagon that American troops would be staying in Syria for quite some time. Just a few weeks after that, Donald Trump erratically and suddenly says, oh, we're leaving Syria. We're pulling troops from Syria. And as I mentioned last week, these are complicated issues. And you could be against the intervention in Syria to begin with, right, when it started, but still recognize that something about Trump pulling troops doesn't make sense. That pulling troops is another victory for Vladimir Putin and for Bashar al-Assad and for Turkish President Erdogan against the Kurds, which I did point out last week. And right on cue, just a day or two later, Jim Mattis says, well, I quit, saying he is going to be resigning as of February 28th, 2019. Disaster for Trump, another major cabinet staffer who's quitting, and Trump's team is crumbling around him like soft limestone, or whatever analogy you want to apply, leaving Trump surrounded only by the ashes of previous bad decisions. The initial tweet from Trump about Mattis's resignation, very, very friendly, saying, quote, I am pleased to announce that our very talented Deputy Secretary of Defense, Patrick Shanahan, will assume the title of Acting Secretary of Defense starting January 1, 2019. Patrick has a long list of accomplishments while serving as deputy and previously bowing. He will be great. But then word got out about the contents of the resignation of Jim Mattis. The letter that Mattis handed to Trump is brutal against Trump. And it points out that Donald Trump is, as I've been saying for months now, damaging relationships with allies, standing with dictators, and Mattis is out. And once word got out that this is what Jim Mattis was saying caused him to leave, every serious defense analyst, every serious policy analyst started saying, Mattis is right here. Trump decided instead of allowing Mattis to resign gracefully, he would do that "you can't quit because I'm firing you" thing, and has indeed decided that it's not February 28th that Mattis has until, but it is January 1st. And he went on one of these hard to decipher Twitter rants where he said, quote, if anybody but your favorite president, Donald J. Trump, announced that after decimating ISIS in Syria, we were going to bring our troops back home happy and healthy, that person would be the most popular hero in America. With me, hit hard instead by the fake news media. Crazy. When President Obama ingloriously fired Jim Mattis, I gave him a second chance. Some thought I shouldn't. I thought I should. Interesting relationship, but I also gave all of the resources that he never really had. Allies are very important, but not when they take advantage of the United States. This is one of the least professional and most beta behaviors that exists in the work world. Even though Trump is doing it incoherently here, Pat, insulting past employees after they've quit, this is just a childish, petulant, unprofessional thing to do.
Well, there's really no reason to be vindictive, right? I mean, Jim Mattis, he was opposed to leaving Syria. He was opposed to pulling 7,000 troops out of Afghanistan. And sometimes you're in a situation where you work for a business, or in this case, an administration, and the goals of said business or administration are diverging from what your values are as a person. That's the situation that he found himself in, and I think he did the right thing to resign. Why would Trump be angry about that? Especially Trump being someone who spent so much time in business having to deal with people coming in and people coming out. I mean, there's just no reason for it.
Well, Mattis is doing the right thing in that he's saying, listen, your agenda is very different than mine. Our values are not aligned. Let me get out of the way so that you can find somebody that will pursue your agenda more precisely or more comfortably or whatever the case may be. But Trump just can't take the fact that anybody would say, I can't be around what you're doing because, of course, I think what you're doing is wrong. That's what's implicit in that statement from Mattis. He almost even makes it explicit. And you're right. Trump just absolutely cannot handle it. And the decision to leave Syria is proving to be so erratic that there are now concerns that Donald Trump may have been blackmailed into the Syria decision because it just makes such little sense. And we'll be talking about that in the next segment. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. We will take a break and pick it up with more about Syria after the break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Christopher Hearn. This is viewer and listener supported media. Be one of the good guys and gals like Christopher Hearn. Sign up at www.joinpakman.com. Also want to say thanks to Cheryl Perry, who is today's longtime sustaining member of the day with us for almost 5 years. Cheryl, thank you. And big announcement. If you've been waiting around for just like the biggest membership special of the year, it's happening January 1st. We are having a 2019 membership special that is going to be the membership special to end all membership specials. It's going to be stunning what goes on. How do you get notified about it? Very easy. Just get our newsletter. Go to davidpakman.com, sign up for our newsletter, and January 1, you will get an email with instructions about how to take advantage, if you want, of the biggest membership special of the year. Okay, we have a ton of Syria-related stories to discuss today, and they're all related to this just remarkably erratic and confusing decision that Donald Trump made to pull troops out of Syria. General Wesley Clark is now claiming that our allies are wondering whether Donald Trump may have been blackmailed into pulling troops out of Syria because the decision is so confusing, so erratic, and runs so counter to what we were told that the Defense Department and Pentagon planned to do. Now, before I get into the analysis, every time I talk about this, I need to say the following, because otherwise, well, I'm still going to get emails about it, but I'll get even more emails if I don't do it. Let me be super clear. Even if you were originally against getting involved in Syria in the first place, you can still recognize that once there are good and bad reasons to get out. And if you do decide to get out, you want to be sure that there is a strategic reason to do so that's not going to make problems even worse or give truly horrible people license to be even more horrible. And one of the things that we learned over the holiday long weekend is that Donald Trump's bizarre decision, which again went directly against what we were told weeks prior that the United States would be doing, which is staying in Syria for a while, Trump's decision came after he spoke on the phone with Turkish President Erdogan, who told him, don't worry about the Kurds. It's all going to be fine. I give you my word. So on the heels of that, in comes General Wesley Clark and asks the sort of increasingly important question, why did Trump do this, and was there some kind of blackmail? Let's take a look at the clip.
Well, I'm very concerned because there doesn't seem to be any strategic rationale for the decision. And if there's no strategic rationale for the decision, then you have to ask, why was the decision made? I can tell you that people around the world are asking this. And some of our friends and allies in the Middle East are asking, well, did Erdogan blackmail the president? Was there a payoff or something? What is it? Why would a guy make a decision like this? Because all the recommendations were against it. And it looked like that all the facts are against it, too. We're not quite finished with ISIS. We're not taking a lot of casualties over there. The Kurds have been reliable allies. So why do this right now?
This is not about imperialism versus anti-imperialism, although that's a perfectly good debate to have. This is not about whether or not the United States should be the world's policeman, which I think it should not. That's a reasonable debate. This is not about pacifism versus war hawking. We are in Syria. Bashar al-Assad and Putin are aligned. Erdogan wants to destroy the Kurds. The Kurds are one of the few groups that the U.S. has recently supported where we haven't had a total backfire yet, at least. So the question is, why is Trump doing this? And maybe more importantly, why is he doing it now after showing his tough guy cards previously on Syria? And blackmail and payoffs involving Turkey are one possibility. There are all sorts of other possibilities involving Russia. There's also a slightly more indirect connection to Saudi Arabia related to Jamal Khashoggi. And I want to explain that one to you because it's, number one, not totally obvious, and number two, fortunately, getting more and more traction. Because you might hear me say Jamal Khashoggi, Syria. What does pulling troops from Syria have to do with Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Jamal Khashoggi? And this is a very interesting theory. Remember, Donald Trump didn't denounce Saudi Arabia over the Khashoggi killing, which took place in Turkey. That's an important factor here. Turkey's investigation was one of the early intelligence sources that pointed to the Saudis, which of course we know now were responsible. Turkey would reasonably want Donald Trump to denounce Saudi Arabia. Trump says, as we know, not going to do it. So Turkey says, well, then we need something in this entire thing. Trump says, what do you want? And Turkey says, how about control of northern Syria, meaning you out of northern Syria? Putin likes it and consents, or whatever, depending on what degree of involvement you think Vladimir Putin has. And then that's how you get exactly these circumstances. So, Pat, blackmail is a possibility. The Jamal Khashoggi connection is a possibility. Putin, the puppet master, is a possibility. But what's clear is, even if you were against getting into Syria in the first place, which many of us were, there is so much going on here that should make us question the underpinnings of this. And I'm hearing it more and more, but there are still people resistant to it saying we should just be glad we're out, period.
Well, just the idea that our president is being blackmailed, that's problematic, but it's a perfectly reasonable conversation to have, knowing that our president is compromised by these foreign countries, by Turkey, by Saudi Arabia, by Russia. And, you know, there were plenty of foreign policy decisions made by former presidents like Obama, for example, that I disagreed with. But I never once suspected that maybe he's being blackmailed. The fact that we're in that situation right now, that's a problem.
People on the right are out of bad faith saying, I thought you liberals wanted the United States out of Syria, and now you're complaining. And there are some people on the left being sort of falsely tricked into commending Trump for this because they don't want to appear partisan when it comes to the military. Once again, just because you thought going into Syria in the first place was a bad idea doesn't mean that you have to ignore the obvious red flags about why Trump made this decision right now. And fascinatingly, some liberals are tied up in a knot because even Noam Chomsky says that this stinks to high heaven and that the U.S. should have stayed in to protect the Kurds. And that's what I want to talk about next. Okay, so this Syria story has many people on the left in a knot, like I said, and we have to talk about that. Remember when Donald Trump claimed that there were thousands of Muslims cheering about 9/11, dancing in the streets or on rooftops, I think the phrase was. And of course, that was a total and utter lie. Just didn't happen. Absolute lie. Now, there actually are people dancing in the streets over Donald Trump's decision to pull troops out of Syria. Those people are called the Taliban. NBC News is reporting that senior members of the Taliban, which is still around, believe this to be a sign of victory getting closer, that their 17 years of struggle have been worthwhile, that this withdrawal should serve as a lesson to Americans not to mess with them. Now, is that a reason that the United States should stay in Syria? Absolutely not. But what's very interesting is that longtime left-wing authority Noam Chomsky happens to agree. And I'm getting emails from people who have genuinely no idea how to react to this. Noam Chomsky, recognizing the importance of the Kurds as a sort of moderating influence in the region, told The Intercept in an interview a few days ago that U.S. troops should stay in Syria to deter attacks on the Kurds, saying, quote, "The other crucial question is the status of the Kurdish areas. Rojava. In my opinion, it makes sense for the United States to maintain a presence which would deter an attack on Kurdish areas. The idea that they should be subjected to an attack by their bitter enemies, the Turks, or by the murderous Assad regime, I think is anything should be done to try to prevent that." Is this correct merely because Noam Chomsky says it? Of course not. Should it make the left say, hold on a second, let me think this through, when even anti-colonialist, anti-imperialist Noam Chomsky is saying something about this doesn't make sense, we should probably be thinking twice about it. And I want to be really clear, I'm not trying to hide the big picture of Noam Chomsky's view on this. His view on this big picture is exactly what I've been talking about since day one, which is Chomsky is generally opposed to our presence in the region. What is the United States doing in this region, big picture? We should be out. I agree with that. Given that we're currently entangled in a bunch of different ways there, we should think through each decision carefully. And deciding to withdraw by first pulling support from the Kurds is exactly the wrong decision. So what's important to understand here, Pat, is you're not pro-war if you question Donald Trump's decision. You're not a hypocrite if you're concerned about the timings and the motivations. The military should exist to prevent genocide when possible, and pulling out of Syria increases the risk of genocide against the Kurds and of more killing by Assad of his own people, period. And it is truly an amazing time to live in when Noam Chomsky is the voice of reason against a Republican president's erratic pulling troops out of the Middle East as the person saying, as Chomsky is saying, wait a second, let's think this through before we do it.
Yeah, 2018, almost 2019. It's an interesting time to live in. Everything's flipped on its head. I tend to agree with the decision to pull out of Syria, but points made by Noam Chomsky, they do give me pause. I always want to listen to what he has to say because I do view him as an authority on these matters. But like what you said earlier, it doesn't mean that he's always right. Doesn't mean that we have to take his word as gospel. It's a crazy time we live in, isn't it?
Now, Pat, do you separate? So let's see. Why is it you want the troops out? But then how do you consider the motivations of Trump for doing it? Like, can you say it's good that the troops are out, but we need to investigate exactly why Trump did it and why now?
In principle, I think we should have fewer interventions around the world. I'd really like to descale the military-industrial complex, that's for sure, especially because I think that the missions that we set out to accomplish in Syria have been completed. But I can understand that two things can be true at once, that it may be the right decision to pull out of Syria and that Trump could be doing it for malicious reasons.
All right, let's, if you have questions about this, I am taking questions on the David Pakman Show Instagram page all day today, at David Pakman Show. If you look at my Instagram story, you can type in a question. If you have questions about Syria or anything else, find me there. I will answer them. And while you're on Instagram, make sure to follow me as well at david.pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to be joined today on the program by Major Richard Ojeda, who's a highly decorated 24-year Army veteran, West Virginia state senator, also a Democratic candidate for the nomination, candidate for the Democratic nomination for president in 2020. Richard, so great to talk to you. I appreciate you joining me today.
Hey, thank you, and I appreciate you having me on.
So let's start. I mean, for people who aren't familiar with you, you are maybe in the grand scheme of things, although less so in West Virginia, not the sort of prototypical model of a candidate for president on the Democratic side. Talk a little bit about your background, sort of the politics you grew up around, your military background, and kind of how that influenced what your politics are today.
Well, you know, I actually never thought that I would be in politics. It was not something that I was really interested in. You know, I grew up in an area here in West Virginia, the southern part of West Virginia. And when I graduated high school, there were very few options. It was basically dig coal, sell drugs, or join the military. And I chose the path of the military. I enjoyed my time in the military. I did, 24 years. But when I finally decided to retire and return back home, I was absolutely shocked and saddened at what I saw. You know, I come back here and I found people that were supposed to be leaders. You know, they had their hands in the cookie jar. In the military, you live in a bubble. And everyone to my left and my right was a light airborne sapper. Everybody that my wife, dealt with was a military spouse. Everyone that my children played with were military brats. We lived on base or we lived right off base, different occasions. But everyone that was around us was part of the military community. And you tend to think that, that's how life is across this country. You deploy to places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and you do that because you believe that you're going to fight to give those people over there a sliver of the greatness that we have in America. You lose people that you love, your closest friends. We call them battle buddies. We consider them to be brothers and sisters. And you cope with that by saying that, they died for a good cause. And then you get out of the military and you come home and you realize that the leaders that you see on the civilian side are nothing like the leaders that you had in the military. In the military, you don't eat until your troops are fed. In the military, you lead from the front. You can't lead from behind, behind a desk. And that's exactly what I saw. I retired from the military and I come home and I found that, we had people with their hands in the cookie jar and nothing was going on around here. I saw an opioid epidemic that was killing thousands upon thousands of people, that has destroyed the communities. We had elderly people that were cutting their meds in half. We had children that were, going to bed hungry. I retired and I started teaching JROTC at a local high school, Chapmanville Regional High School. And on the first day, I saw a young lady that had a shirt on that had holes in it, and it was dirty. And during the lunchtime, the cafeteria ladies walked out and put these big metal trays of corn dogs on the table, and they said, extra corn dogs. And I saw girls jump over tables to grab handfuls of corn dogs to put in their purses. And I realized it's because they're hungry and they want to have some food when they get home. So I realized that these leaders were not doing their jobs. So I started challenging these leaders. I started calling them out. And of course, when I was in the military, every time I come home, everybody wanted to pat me on the back and tell me, we respect your service. All these leaders, when I come home, I started a nonprofit organization that was picking up trash, pulling tires out of the creeks, covering graffiti, feeding people, sending kids to school with new shoes on their feet. And every politician wanted to come around and take photograph with us and give the thumbs up like they're with us. They wasn't with us when we was picking up the trash and pulling the tires out of the creeks, but they wanted to come take photographs in front of the stacks of tires and the mounds of trash.
And Richard, if I may, just so we can get figure how this plays into your politics, you were not a particularly liberal guy growing up, right? And in 2016, you actually voted for Donald Trump, and I'm sure we'll get to that. And you've since sort of had a political awakening of sorts. How much of a conservative guy were you growing up?
I don't think it's necessarily conservative, either side. I think I'm pretty much the type of person that kind of walks right down the middle. And I think there's a lot of people around here that are that way. But what happened in terms of the 2016 election, I wanted Bernie Sanders, and I think most people around here did. Bernie Sanders won all 55 counties. But, it was robbed from Bernie Sanders.
In the primary, you mean?
Absolutely. It was robbed from Bernie Sanders in the primary. And I mean, they show where, the Democratic Party basically said, Hillary Clinton, and that was not what the people wanted. So, number one, the people in West Virginia automatically felt like their vote was stolen from them. So, and it was stolen from them and given to Hillary Clinton. So, number one, that right there caused a lot of anger around here. Then you had the two people, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. And, it turned out to be the lesser of two evils. I knew the things that Donald Trump was saying a lot of it was garbage in terms of the way he spoke about women and things like that. I didn't appreciate that. But at the end of the day, I look out my window and I look at the community in which I live in. And the majority of people here rely on coal. And I understand we've got to pull away. Coal is no longer going to be viable as an energy source. We've got to bring more opportunities in here to transition for when coal is gone. But right now, that's the only way these people know how to feed their family.
Yeah, and we'll get to energy a little bit, but not to skip ahead, just so everybody really understands your background. So you're saying that in the Democratic primary in 2016, you voted for Bernie Sanders. Is that correct?
That's right. I supported Bernie Sanders. I wanted Bernie Sanders to win.
And then ultimately he lost. And as you say, of course, there were circumstances in the Democratic primary, which we've talked about on the program many times and our audience will be familiar with. You eventually made the decision that as a moderate guy, you were going to vote for Trump over Hillary Clinton. And you believed it was a lesser of two evils choice. Is that right?
That's right, because he was talking about putting these coal miners back to work, and she was talking about job training with jobs that do not exist in West Virginia. So it become who can let people put food on the table.
Now, is there a case to be made that Donald Trump sort of kowtowing to the pro-coal community, which is an important community in West Virginia economically, no question about it, was in a sense a fantasy because the free market is sort of deciding that coal is going away, that ultimately you can maybe artificially create some coal jobs in the short run, but that this is an industry that is dying? Wouldn't we be better served saying, let's figure out how to deal with that rather than pretending we're going to create coal jobs that ultimately are going to disappear?
You're right. You're absolutely right with that. But, it's one of those things where at that time it was all about looking at the people and saying, they need something and they need something now. It's no different than if you was to go up to Detroit and say that you're going to bring all the jobs back for the auto industry. Those people up there, even though they may think, well, I don't know if it's possible, but they're going to have a little bit of hope because it's better than what the other alternative is.
Oh, so that's actually more interesting. So in a sense, do you think that when Donald Trump was saying, we're going to just grow the coal industry, we're bringing back coal jobs, are you saying people knew it wasn't true, but it still appealed to them anyway?
No, I'm not saying that they knew it wasn't true. I'm saying that, there comes a time when if that's the only thing that you have, if you're a coal miner and you don't have, the truth is, you don't have to have a college degree to be a coal miner. But you can make a lot of money as a coal miner. You can support your family. You can provide for your family. And it gets to the point where you start to think, if it's gone, then the only thing that I have left is your Wendy's and your Walmarts, or I have to leave. And then you just want it to when somebody says they can keep it, you are willing to put your trust in that person because that's all you have. And that's a hard pill to swallow. But that's what it was. And has he turned coal around? Well, we have had an uptick in coal, but it wasn't very long ago. Just a couple of weeks before the midterm elections, we had a major coal mine right in Wyoming County shut down, and you're talking over 400 jobs. I can assure you, those 400 plus families are wondering. I thought this was supposed to be great. I thought we were supposed to be able to keep this going forever. but they're starting to realize that that's not the case.
So what ultimately changed your mind on Trump? Were you not only opposed Trump now, but are running as a Democrat? What was it that pushed you away after deciding to vote for him in 2016?
You know, it was everything. I mean, once he took over, it's been a complete circus. I mean, you know, I've said from day one, you know, kick your kids out of the Oval Office, put your cell phone down, stop tweeting, tweet fighting with everyone. You know, listen to the people that you surround yourselves with. Successful leaders surround themselves with intelligent people, and the people that he surrounded himself with, even in the beginning, have been absolute train wrecks. You know, Betsy DeVos, education, no. You know, I mean, and then the people that he has, the people that are amazing that he has surrounded himself with, he doesn't listen to. I mean, you know, he put, you know, Generals Kelly and Mattis, and, you know, both of them are now gone. And they're gone because he refuses to listen to brilliant military minds. He thinks that he knows more than the generals. And that is absolutely the wrong, you know, stance to take. You know, he has not surrounded himself with intelligent people, and it has been a complete train wreck ever since.
So as far as your candidacy now for 2020, how do you balance, or what is the sort of balance between opposing the Trump agenda, but also creating and putting forward ideas of your own, a sort of more aspirational approach? How do you balance the two? Where is the balance?
Well, you know, when it comes to me, I'm pushing pillars that I want to you know, release to everyone, and I believe that these are things that that people will agree with, and a lot of people will like seeing coming from somebody who's running for the presidency of the United States of America. You know, I'm talking about sacrifice. You know, once again, remember, I'm a military guy. Today, a staff sergeant in the military that is in harm's way, that has 2 children, qualifies for food stamps. Now, you don't join the military for pay. Everybody knows that you don't join the military to become rich. But that's a life of sacrifice. And that's exactly what our servicemen and women do every day. They sacrifice. But we've got people that run for office. Your congressmen, your senators, president of the United States, and they stand in front of you and they say, I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to work for you. I'm going to do everything in my life to improve your lives. That's not what they're doing. They're not sacrificing. Okay? They become a congressman. They become a senator. And, you know, within 1 or 2 terms, they're worth $30 million. They know what this is about: wealth and power to the majority of people that throw their hat in the ring. And you know what? They get in office, and it's not about trying to solve problems. It's about figuring out who they can impress to be able to secure that next level job for when they are done being in politics. You know, we know that lobbyists, you know, grease the pockets. And we know that a lot of these people do everything in their power to impress those lobbyists, because they know that those lobbyists are the ones that are going to put the good word in for them so that they can get that job being a lobbyist when they're done with politics. And we know that 35% of congressmen become lobbyists. 50% of senators become lobbyists. And that's why, you know, they're not sacrificing. It's self-serving is what it is. It's not selfless service. And that's where we're at. So, you know, the things that I'm saying, you know, these are things that I'm willing to follow through with. You know, in terms of how I'm going to deal with issues, I will surround myself with intelligent folks, and I will listen to what they have to say. And we will make sure that I get everything that I need when I make my decision, so that I know that when I do make my decision, I will be helping people and not hurting people. And to me, that's the way that you have to be. And that deals with everything here in America, deals with stuff, you know, outside this country. And, you know, that's exactly the way where I stand.
All right, that's a good place to pause our conversation, and we'll dig into the specific issues with Richard Ojeda on tomorrow's program. He is running for president in 2020. Richard Ojeda is a West Virginia state senator, and we will continue our conversation with him on tomorrow's program.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The end of December holidays are stressful times for a lot of people. Sometimes it's because of travel. Sometimes it's because of maybe seeing family you don't really want to see, or at least it's stressful to see. Some people just get stressed out realizing another year has gone by and you only went to the gym for that first week of January and then forgot about it, or whatever. If you are under more than a dozen investigations and responsible for destroying the economy of the United States, it's probably even more stressful, as evidenced by Donald Trump being on tilt for this long holiday weekend that we're coming back from, with just wacky behavior followed by even wackier behavior. And this includes tweeting a picture of himself apparently signing a stack of blank bills or executive orders, seeming to have no text on them, and also tweeting completely erratically. The tweets first. I already showed you some of Trump's erratic tweets. Here's a pity me Trump tweet from over the holiday weekend where he said, quote, "I am all alone, poor me, in the White House, waiting for the Democrats to come back and make a deal on desperately needed border security. At some point, the Democrats not wanting to make a deal will cost our capital C country more money than the capitalized border wall we are all talking about." Crazy. Very strange tweet, blaming Democrats when Republicans control everything. I'm all alone at the White House. Very, very weird. But then it gets even stranger. Right before the shutdown started at midnight during the holiday break that we had, Trump went on Twitter and again slammed Democrats and pointed to all the bills he's signing in the Oval Office. Check out this tweet where he said, quote, "Some of the many bills that I am signing in the Oval Office right now," and he's pictured next to a huge stack of bills about as tall as his head, "canceled my trip on Air Force One to Florida while we wait to see if the Democrats will help us to protect America's southern border." But something is weird about this picture. If you look at just the picture, people started noticing that it wasn't evident that there was actually any text on the bill that Donald Trump is signing. And if you zoom in on just the paper, you also notice that there appears to be no text on it whatsoever. Now, you could say, well, the angle is making it so it's hard to see the text, or the lighting is making it so it's hard to see the text. We're not seeing anything there. Not the big title of whatever he's signing, not the line he should be using, that big Sharpie, to sign on. So it appears as though Trump staged a picture of himself signing all sorts of bills that are just blank, like it's just a stunt. The government's shutting down, the economy's in free fall, and Donald Trump appears to be staging photo ops with fake bills to sign. Now, for people saying that one had nothing on it for security reasons, but all the other stack of bills is real, well, the other problem is that there's a website, govtrack.us, which looks at bills that are passed. 2 bills are listed for the date of the tweet, and no bills are listed for the few days following, which you would imagine if Donald Trump is signing this big stack of bills, they would show up somewhere as bills or executive orders that Donald Trump has signed. So this is outrageously funny, but there's a more serious implication here. Let's look again at the tweet that Donald Trump put out about this. He said, "Some of the many bills that I'm signing in the Oval Office right now canceled my trip on Air Force One to Florida while we wait to see if the Democrats will help us to protect the border." He's saying that he's only signing these bills now. I mean, they appear to be fake bills, but it doesn't matter. He's claiming that Democrats refusing to give him what he wants on the border wall caused him to cancel his trip to Florida, which are causing him to sign all of these bills in. Aren't the bills either bills that should be signed or shouldn't be signed? And even if he was going to Florida, he could be signing them on the plane. Like, isn't this extraordinarily dangerous, Pat, that he's saying, when I don't get what I want from Democrats, I sign bills sooner? Shouldn't each bill be signed on the basis of how important it is and what it does and what the timing of it should be, regardless of playing politics?
Yeah, this falls apart on so many different levels. And couldn't he have just put a little bit of effort into the lie? Like, he could have printed out a fake bill and signed the thing and then took the photo. I don't know why he wouldn't put in that little bit of effort. And also remember that Trump did take credit for the government shutdown. He told Schumer and Pelosi that he would take the mantle. I guess he's rescinded on that?
I don't know at this point whether he says he shut down the government or he had to do it because of Democrats or Democrats shut down the government. The content of this particular tweet is lies. The implications are childish and petulant. The photo op appears to be a staged lie. He's using that huge dumb Sharpie as usual, and he looks generally out of place in the Oval Office, and the world is laughing more and more loudly at us because of this man. And instead of actually dealing with the increasing list of problems that we have, he's signing blank bills to be able to tweet about it in the Oval Office. Extraordinarily disturbing. It's time for my favorite story segue. Hey, this is kind of a weird thing. Donald and Melania Trump, in the spirit of Christmas, spoke to kids on the phone about where Santa is on his gift delivery trip. Okay, fine, whatever. It's a Christmas tradition of some kind for the president, I guess. So clearly the kids that they're speaking to, I guess, believe in Santa. So Trump gets on the phone with a 7-year-old kid named Coleman and says to the kid that belief in Santa at age 7 is marginal. Now, if the kid believes in Santa, this isn't really a conversation to have with the kid, right? Take a listen to this video.
Well, that's very good. And you just have a good time. Are you still a believer in Santa? Because at 7 it's marginal, right? Well, you just enjoy yourself.
We just spoke on the bonus show last week, Pat, about belief in Santa, and I explained I never believed in Santa. Being Jewish, when I was growing up, there was never a situation where I thought Santa was real. And I don't really have a recollection about when my classmates realized that Santa wasn't real. I know that my sister, who's half Jewish, stopped believing in Santa on her own around 7 or 8. But it doesn't seem like it's the president who should be telling kids that there's no Santa on calls arranged to tell kids where Santa is. Like, doesn't something about this seem weirdly Grinch-like?
Yeah, I found out that Santa wasn't real pretty early on. Like, I was 6 or 7 years old, and I immediately told all my friends because I just could not contain myself. That's something that's acceptable if you're only 6 or 7 years old and you can't really weigh the consequences of your actions. But if you're like 72, I think you should know better.
If I found out that my kid at school was going around telling other kids that there was no Santa, I'd probably tell the teacher, I don't really see a problem. I'm not going to tell my kids to lie. But if you're president and you're talking to kids about Santa, this doesn't seem like what you should be doing. And I mentioned this to you, number one, because it's been Christmas and we're doing something a little more lighthearted, even though it again shows that Trump is capable of screwing up even the smallest things. I was thinking of the Santa thing sort of like swearing. Like, I don't swear much, but I don't think swearing's a big deal. And in Argentina, where I was born, swearing on TV is just really not a huge deal. Swearing at school or at home, you don't do it excessively, but it's just not a big deal. If my kid's teacher called and said, your son or daughter is swearing in school, I would say, I really don't see that as a problem, but I would explain it can be disruptive. You should pare down the swearing. But in and of itself, I don't see swearing as a big deal. But it would be really weird if the president called my 7-year-old kid and was swearing up a storm on the phone. That I would find to be just a little bit strange. In the same manner, it's strange for Trump to have scheduled calls with kids to talk about Santa and talk about belief in Santa being marginal with a 7-year-old. And for anyone who is comfortable with Trump winging it in meetings with foreign leaders, this is what happens when Trump wings it, okay? He's told he's going to make calls to kids about Santa, and nobody says, by the way, these kids think Santa is real. Maybe as the president, you shouldn't allude to Santa not being real. Trump decided to wing it, and this is what happens. Just imagine what is happening in Singapore when Trump wings it with Kim Jong-un, or at the G20 or at the UN when the entire crowd starts laughing at Trump because he says such silly things. We don't want Trump winging things because he's able to screw up even the most minor presidential appearances. We have a voicemail number, which is 219-2-DAVID-P. Got a voicemail about Trump and Hillary. Yes, people are still talking about Hillary Clinton. It's a very specific, pointed, aggressive question to me. Let's take a listen to it.
Yeah, I was kind of curious. You have been talking a lot about all the stuff that Trump is up to and everything, but I'm pretty sure you voted for Hillary, which tells me that you knowingly, wittingly, and without any pressure voted for lying, cheating, stealing, covering up. I'm just kind of curious how with a straight face you can say that you don't like that when it's pretty obvious you voted for that. So just kind of wondering if you could address that issue on the air.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, I claim to be opposed to the criminality of Donald Trump, but I voted for Hillary. Therefore, I was endorsing criminality because Hillary is a criminal. Listen, I don't know that there is really a serious conversation to have with this individual, but this is exactly the type of false equivalency stuff that got us Trump in the first place. Because remember, we're talking about a guy who won, yes, with the help of a foreign country, sure, but because of 77,000 votes across 3 states. And if we had people not falsely equating Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, because Hillary was going to start wars, and Hillary was going to tank the economy, and Hillary was going to do all the things that Donald Trump has done, which clearly Hillary Clinton was not going to do, you end up with a situation where people say, listen, it was exactly the same thing. And now that we realize that it's not the same thing, now that we realize that on the climate, these two could not have been further apart, now that we realize that as far as Supreme Court picks and the impact on the Supreme Court, these two could not have been further apart, the Hillary-Trump false equivalency pretty quickly falls apart. But beyond that, criminality, come on. I know all the conspiracy theories about Hillary, but if you're going to make the case that she did criminal things and that she's going to end up behind bars, when is the investigation going to start? I'm still waiting around for that. So give me a break. But this is the type of person that votes. So what's just important is we're not going to convince that guy not to vote for Trump in 2020. It would be much easier to get 10 people who are lukewarm about voting to go out and go to the polls and vote, and you would have way more of an impact than wasting your time trying to change his mind. On the bonus show today, an Argentinian radio host will avoid criminal prosecution by discussing gender issues. What's going on in my home country? We will also talk about Japan suffering their biggest natural population decline ever this year in 2018. This is an ongoing issue that we've been talking about. We will also talk about North Korea's focus on basketball. Basketball, an obsession of Kim Jong-un, and they continue to promote basketball as an important project for the Republic of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, also known as North Korea, as we call it. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Remember, January 1, 2019, the biggest membership special of the year. If you want to be notified about that membership special, simply go to davidpakman.com, sign up for our newsletter, and on January 1, you will get an email with instructions on how to take advantage of the biggest membership special of the year. Exciting stuff. We will talk to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.